What are your thoughts on how initial token offerings and the whole blockchain ecosystem affects venture capital and raising money going forward, building businesses, DAOs? Anybody have any big thoughts?
Yeah, so I had Mark Suster at our summit last Friday. He's a very prominent venture capitalist, Upfront Ventures. They have about $2 billion under management. Anyway, he made a whole presentation keynote for 7 to 8 minutes. And it was really interesting to see him as a VC, his perspective of what he believes. And his biggest issue was why he doesn't like ICOs or STOs, I don't know how you want to call it, was that the idea of instant liquidity. That drove him nuts. He's like, I don't like the idea that you can do an ICO and the investor gets instant liquidity, but also the participants, whether the founders or their early the officers, and he went on a tirade about that. But then after his speech, I had a panel exactly on the subject, are ICOs disrupting VCs? And we had on it, the guys who founded Augur, we had people who were really from the ICO space and world and investing in ICOs, and they couldn't care less. They actually thought the idea of liquidity was a good thing. So you have a fight between those who believe that liquidity is bad and those who believe liquidity is great.
I mean, I agree. Look, I think the kind of tokenizing the venture capital space is a good way, one, for that liquidity approach. Now, whether I agree with you, okay, are the founders and the management team getting the tokens and the value of those tokens from the get-go? I mean, if a lot of companies, including Corl, for example, we're vesting our tokens, right? The management team doesn't get anything. We have lockup periods. We're not getting it from day one. But at the same time, your liquidity and the value of that token at the end of the day will depend on the success of the project, how big the project is. Whatever happens in the venture capital space, whether a company is performing good or bad, is happening offline. No one knows except those like the investors, the early investors on the board of directors. And if you're tokenizing that, your token value should be driven by how well the company is performing. Is it adding new partners? Is it adding new acquisitions? Is the client base growing? So that should be a driver for your value. And at the end of the day, as an investor, you can either keep holding your token and because you believe this company is going to go even further, or if the company is not performing at all, at least as an investor, now you have the option of getting out. I mean, how many startups out there have raised money and then failed to launch at one point, or lived for 3 years, 4 years, and then you never heard of them again? I mean, there's a couple of good projects that started like that and then collapsed over the years. And that kind of is giving you the option as an investor to kind of get out and liquidate. Are you losing all your money at one point? Maybe, but at least you have that option of getting out of an investment. I don't see it necessarily as a bad thing. I kind of agree it's more of upgrading the venture capital space. But I think I find it's more of a complementary add-on, not a replacement. I mean, venture capital is still good for some startups and giving up equity, not necessarily for everyone. But it's at least as a venture capital investor, you now have the option of, okay, well, now I have the option of buying equity in a company or buying a token, and then if that investment is not going well, I can get out, I can liquidate. And
how many Bitcoin billionaires are there? And how many people bought pizza for $1 bajillion because they didn't see the value going somewhere? That's the problem with liquidity, is people aren't smart enough to hold on to things that might be valuable in the future. So that you can crash economies.
I'm definitely in the liquidity is good camp. I mean, part of why Polymath is so exciting to me is that we can now have private companies and give those investors some level of liquidity. I mean, it depends on the number of investors that are allowed to participate just based on that offering type. But I mean, you can go from a situation where you have zero liquidity and your company essentially has a completely private multiple, like a completely private price to earnings multiple. And now you can give those investors some liquidity, and now the multiple on that company you would think would increase somewhat. It wouldn't be exactly a public company multiple, but it would be kind of between there. And so you kind of have this somewhat negative side effect of having immediate liquidity, where you can do things like where the private investors get into a round 1 week before the public and then they immediately dump their tokens for an instant gain. Like, that to me is kind of a negative side effect of immediate liquidity. But the added benefits of people being able to feel more comfortable funding early stage projects to me outweighs kind of the negative side effects. And
Exactly.
and as Sam said, I mean, you can still lock up, you can still make people vest. So there doesn't have to be immediate liquidity for every single person involved. You can still make the people who are actually working on the project and building it, you can still force them into vesting or into locking up for any period of time.